Let's talk about Gen Z. The entire Zoomer outlook on life boils down to not taking anything seriously. How do we feel about this? I don't know, but first, let's see some of their tweets. They must take a live and let live attitude. That makes sense. The only time they take offense is when a black person is killed or their own Zoomer rights are stepped on. I don't know how accurate that is. That feels laced with boomer conspiracy. But nothing else matters. I actually think that when we look at the way Gen Z was raised, we'll get to it later in the thread, but when we look at the way that Gen Z was raised, we were raised in like fear and nihilism and negativity, right? There's all these memes that like millennials are nothing matters and they're like pressed about it. And then Gen Z is like nothing matters and we're happy about it. Because like nothing does matter. And we were raised in the place where nothing does matter. Because we're being watched, everything's being done for us. We can't go outside. You know, we're not supposed to make our own decisions. We're supposed to follow these life paths set out before us by our society, by our family, by our government, by our, I don't know, destined things. It's pretty poopy. And then on top of that, you know, keep us in fear, have us do various drills for shooters, you know, keep guns in schools, keep us right on the edge of death all the time. You know, there's actually a video here from Jordan Peterson later in the thread. I'm gonna go ahead and play the whole video.
Man, I went to this bar in Nashville. This band was playing Kelly's Heroes, a great guitarist, best guitarist I've ever seen. And they were playing old country music with a heavy blues rock twist. So they do this great version of Ghost Riders in the Sky. And this brilliant guitarist just goes way out on a limb. And everybody in the crowd, it was so fun to be there. They're just thrilled to death. Because they're watching this man doing the same thing that surfers do. He's like dancing on the edge of chaos and order in this virtuosic manner. And everyone is so taken by that it just lifts them out of the normality of their existence. You know, you see this joy just transfuse them, and that's because they got an intimation of genuine meaning.
He talks about this like surfer, right? And the idea of living on the edge between chaos and harmony. And I think Gen Z has actually embodied this in a lot of the ways that we live our lives, right? We're constantly living in the edge of chaos and harmony with the world around us. And we're aware that everything's awful, right? It's been pushed into us our whole lives that everything's awful. Everything is awful. Violence is crazy here in America. Like there's a violence is crazy, propaganda goes crazy, CIA psyops go crazy. We have been living, most of Gen Z, was born and raised in the time past the Patriot Act. Right? Like, we did not get the same childhood that everybody else got. So, of course, we're gonna act different. And then she goes on to talk about hookups a little bit, and the idea that, like, hookups are supposed to be low pressure, low key. Now, the thing is, I feel like the idea of a hookup is not a new thing, right? From what it sounds like, everybody was hooking up back in the past, and Gen Z is actually having less sex than everybody else. You know, people might want to claim that, oh, in the past, boomers had relationships and sex, but like, they also were just fucking. Did you know most boomers cheat on their spouses? Did you know most boomers get divorced? Did you know most love isn't real? So like, bestie. I also feel that this synopsis, it did make me giggle that they used the decal scale, but they made it look all pretty. They made a decal scale for ladies. Oh my gosh, it's so hilarious. The idea is that some people are moving away from relationships. They don't want relationships. They don't want a lifelong, fall in love, this is it forever relationship. They understand we're young. Why don't we just be young and do young things? We don't need to stay together for the rest of our lives. We can just have fun. We can just enjoy this period of time with each other. And as a result, you don't want things to get too close, right? You don't want to get too clingy and obsessive and like, You don't want somebody to be telling you how they're going to own you for the rest of your life. Like, that's not the vibes in Gen Z. We don't want to be owned. We want to own ourselves, maybe. Also, just to clarify, somebody who wants a traditional wife and kids, I don't think that's considered an incel. Incel stands for involuntarily celibate. So that doesn't even make sense in this context, so bro. This is exhausting because for most women, emotions can't be put on a leash. The only reason that emotions can be put on a leash for men is because they're groomed into emotional instability from a young age. They're groomed into masculinity, like toxic masculinity. They're groomed into negative behaviors when it comes to emotions, when it comes to interpersonal relationships. And the reason for this is because they're meant to benefit society rather than themselves. Young men are pushed towards the workforce, you know, and young women too. Again, we already talked about this. Sometimes you just want something a little bit less serious. Now, although this picture, the like meta irony that goes on for ad infinitum, that's pretty base. I think that is an accurate depiction of how a lot of people process information now. But one thing that I think is important to remember is like, well, just go watch some jreg. Jreg talks about meta irony and irony and post irony and all these other things. Just watch some of those and you'll get an idea. Since the Zoomer can't express his true self, he's forced to forever ask questions to root out more. I think the idea that there is a true self underlying is a bad brainworm that many older generations do hold. I don't think there's one true self that exists. I think a lot of Gen Z has come to understand that there's a lot of flexibility in how you can be as a person. So if you're feeling uncomfortable about something, if you're feeling too comfortable about something, it's useful to ask yourself, like, why do I feel this way? You know, asking questions to dig deeper, to figure out your true self, to understand more of your own identity. I think another thing that all these old people don't really consider is that, like, they got the chance to explore themselves. They also had a lot less access to information, generally speaking. Like, in terms of, you know, they didn't really have access to the internet. They didn't have access to, well, they had books and things, but, like, there's a lot less freely available information in the past than there is now. Let me get my dog. 1 second. I got interrupted, but the basic idea was that Gen Z questioning themselves is them finding out who they are in their identity. Gen Z is one of the first generations that focuses on mental health. Mental health is a huge priority for them. Their rates of drug abuse are lower. Their rates of like unsafe sex are lower. Gen Z is a healthier generation than almost any generation before. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're having discussions like this. Zoomers aren't nihilists in the sense that nothing matters. They're nihilists in the sense that nothing matters besides pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. Which is fair, right? Like, what else is there? What are we supposed to strive for? Long careers in a world that's destined to end in 15? I'm not going to prepare for a 45-year career just to die in 15, bestie. You know, I grew up my entire life. I've been told, like, you're not, like, we're going to see the end of the world in your generation. And none of my parents' generations care, right? My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, none of them care, but me? I'm dying, bestie. Why would I spend time doing things for the system that got us to the death place? Wouldn't make any sense to me. Wouldn't make any sense in my thinker. I do agree that a lot of Gen Z is a more emotionally hedged. You know, if things might take a lot of emotion, they won't do it. Things like, I don't know, anxiety or other things. But a lot of these sensors do exist to keep us safe. And it's not our fault that all of the adults in our lives, all of the surrounding environment in our lives has caused our sensors to be extremely off crack, right? Like, we weren't the ones playing the news 24/7 when we were a kid. We weren't the one being bigots or like being Islamophobes after 9/11. We weren't the ones who started the school shooter drills. We weren't the ones that like forced all these kids to pretend that there was a school shooter in their area, right? Like, we weren't doing this shit. We were just along for the ride, bestie. So we're just gonna we're gonna take our pleasure and avoid our pain while we're doing it. You know, you guys built this framework. Also, they try to use this TikTok video as a way to say like, oh, Gen Z doesn't have any emotions.
A little over a week ago, my ex-fiance drove me 24 hours back home. We were together for 5 years. After accepting that we both wanted to live in different states, it was time to do the hardest part. One being knowing that we didn't want to split the cats up. They're really good together. We were trying to do this in a healthy manner. We had lots of honest conversations, and had an understanding of what we both wanted individually. Not to say that some days weren't awful, but I think it helped that we were best friends before we started dating. At some point I wrote down, I've been trying my very hardest not to view this end as the terrible, awful reality that it is, and instead appreciate the wonderful, loving, enormous experience that it was. I'll probably just keep reading that for a while.
First of all, homegirl's literally crying in the video. Crying in the video. Also, it's really easy to make a 45-second TikTok to, like, say something without, like, breaking down on camera. Like, I almost guarantee they had plenty of breakdowns. They had plenty of crying sessions. But it just wasn't relevant. It wasn't relevant. He's definitely gay comment was unnecessary. Like, it doesn't mean that he's gay. They were together for 5 years. 5 years is a long time. People break up all the time. And again, in the video it says, we independently thought about what was best for us. We thought what was best for us as individuals rather than looking for us as a couple. I think past generations like to rely on others. They're like, I need a partner. I need somebody to complete me. Whereas Gen Z is saying, I'm gonna fucking complete myself, and like, you can boost me, but I'm gonna complete myself, thank you. I did find this comment about it's like we're reading a checklist from a therapist or HR office. I found that kind of funny. I feel like a lot of Gen Z will turn to the repository of knowledge, also known as the internet, to figure out how to do things, and sometimes, you know, you do find some steps on the internet. But I don't know, I feel like utilizing information to sidestep a lot of hardship isn't a bad thing. Like, as humans, we should be using information from previous generations, from previous people who are experiencing things, to make our lives easier. Like, why would I don't know. I don't understand why you would push for an unhealthy breakup or like a possessive breakup, or like, I don't know, something unhealthy over the idea of like going for health. And I say this as somebody who did have an unhealthy breakup. But I'm saying, like, why would you aspire to that, right? Like, why is that your goal? I don't know. Also, this graph, oh my gosh. So they go on less dates, sure, but they're drinking less, they're giving into capitalism less. Like, they don't have the desire to push themselves for, again, a system that doesn't care about us, that is killing us, that's ending our world. Like, again, all of us have been told we're literally going to die in our generations. Literally. All of us. All of us. In this Goblin Mode article, or like the death of ideals, I actually really liked it. There's this part where it talks about how this Goblin Mode idea, or like the idea of Goblin Mode, which is like living chaotically, right? It's like they liken it to like a depression lifestyle.
I don't understand why you keep laughing.
You're doing it so well.
Thank you. I didn't come here to fuck around.
This idea of Goblin Mode is the pushback against capitalism and toxic wellness. I think there's a lot more than just Goblin Mode that we see. You know, we do see a lot of Gen Z attempting to do healthy things, but I think the idea of Goblin Mode is more so meant to relate to the realities of other humans, where previous generations, previous cultures, we'll say, because I feel like our cultures are pretty different, use the idea that like everybody is this good, so you also have to be this good, and everybody portrays this image of like being this good at like life. You know, you're good at life. You don't let people know when you're having a hard time. You keep it to yourself. You just knuckle up and deal with it, or whatever. Goblin Mode is the idea that we're all in this together. We're all struggling sometimes. We're all having a hard time. You know, sometimes you just have a Goblin Mode night. Sometimes you're gonna be awake at 3 a.m. eating some ice cream, crying, haven't showered for a couple days. Like, it's a real thing, and we're in this together. I like the like camaraderie that I feel when I see things like Goblin Mode or other things on the internet, because it knows that I'm not alone, you know? We're not fighting for this toxic wellness, toxic positivity standard. We're embracing reality as it is. You know, it's radical acceptance rather than toxic positivity. This Jordan Peterson video, the author says, oh, Gen Z is making fun of Jordan Peterson. And then if we look at what Gen Z is saying, well, like, there's like 3 people making fun of JP. And like, they're saying, oh, JP's just getting the energy that he puts back. You know, Jordan Peterson's always making fun of other people, which he kind of is. You know, what goes around comes around. And I don't think they're shitting on the experience that he had. They're not shitting on the fact that he went to get music. They're shitting at the way that he's describing it, but also that, like, he is saying one thing to, like, deny yourself a lot of, I don't know. A lot of Gen Z was raised watching Jordan Peterson, and the Jordan Peterson in that video and the Jordan Peterson that a lot of us watched seem a little bit different, right? Like, he tries to maintain this front, this like toxic positive front, this like strong masculine front that isn't authentic. Authentically, he also has a lot of hard and like negative and like struggle, but he doesn't want to relate to other people in this. He wants to maintain this image of like better than. I think that's what Gen Z is poking fun at. They're poking fun at like this toxic positive, toxic wellness. Somebody else also mentions he works with the most depressed people ever. So like, of course, being in a room of happy people is going to be like inspirational to him, which I also do understand that as well. And I don't want to shit on JP too much, because even though he is really harmful to some communities and he says really not nice things about my community sometimes, I do think that what he has said on the internet has been useful. I don't know. I used to listen to a lot of JP advice. Maybe that's why I'm so fucked up. I don't know. Anyways, deep down, Zoomers want to express passionate emotions like sorrow and love, but they can't. A lot of Gen Z does really struggle to communicate emotions verbally. A lot of Gen Z does really struggle with this idea of like verbal, like sometimes talking about your feelings can be really difficult. But one of the great benefits of Gen Z is that we grew up with access to the internet and technology. And as a result, we have taken to creating media that expresses these feelings, these shared identities, cultures, and we put them in memes, right? Memes are full of, they're meant to evoke emotions. Videos are meant to evoke emotions. And a lot of Gen Z are creators. A lot of Gen Z knows, like, is working on being creative and expressing themselves through medium that like are meant to be related to other people, right? Like I make a meme, I watch it. I make a meme, I watch it. I'm like, wow, that makes me feel this way. I like this meme. I post it. Somebody else watches it. It might make them feel not exactly the same, but similar. Maybe it pulls on similar parts of their brain and body. They feel similar emotions. If it's a sad meme, maybe they feel sad. Maybe they get a completely different reaction to it, right? Because their lived experience will cause them to interpret this art differently. But for somebody to say Gen Z is not expressing themselves is just inaccurate, because Gen Z is expressing themselves all the time on TikTok, on social media, and then they're just said that they're complaining, that they're wasting their lives, that they're not really indulging in anything valuable, without really thinking about the fact that they're literally sharing their emotions. They're literally relating with other people. They're literally trying to build social community in a world that doesn't let us go outside, has us fearing for our lives in every waking second. Like, we live in the bad place. We're making the most of the bad place. I don't know. Trigger warning, talking about self-harm in like 2 seconds. Gen Z does self-harm a lot. I would argue that many previous generations also self-harmed a lot, and they might not even recognize that it is self-harm, right? Previous generations did a lot more drugs. They had a lot more like sex. They engaged in a lot more risky behaviors than Gen Z does. Gen Z cuts themselves, burn themselves, starve themselves maybe, but previous generations also starved themselves, cut themselves, burned themselves, hurt themselves, engaged in behaviors that led to destruction of their own lives. So I think it's unfair to be like, oh, Gen Z's doing this so bad, when like old people just ignore that they have issues and pretend like they don't have problems. Gen Z is just open about our problems, and we let people know that we have issues because we relate to each other, and then we use memes to like share in the experience. They don't know how to make sense of their emotions, so they outsource it to a therapist or to social media. Guess what? You know why we don't know how to fucking deal with our emotions? Because we've been stuffed too full of them by the world, because nobody fucking taught us how to handle our emotions. Like, you're expecting children, or like, Gen Z is not all children, right? But like, you're expecting people that who were children to just know how to handle their emotions, right? And like, y'all are the fuckers that didn't teach us. Y'all are the fuckers that left us in the predicament where we don't know what we're doing. So of course we're gonna have to go to professionals, right? Isn't that the idea? If you're having an issue, go see a professional. Isn't that like what y'all fucking taught us, right? Go see a professional, figure your shit out, or some people do go to social media. Personally, I have found using social media incredibly valuable in opening my eyes. I have access to the entire world, essentially. Billions of people I have access to for alternate opinions, for all alternate perspectives. If I'm having an issue, somebody's out there either with the same issue, we can relate, or they already solved the issue and they can help me figure out how to fix my issue, right? The internet is the repository of knowledge for all of humanity. We might as well use it. Like, it connects us It is the fungus in our it's the mycelium in our forest. That's a person, 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 that's a person. The mycelium connects all of it. The mycelium is the internet, social media in particular. I'm thinking TikTok, but it works as a general principle too. And the trees are benefiting from this mycelium network. They're benefiting from the information transferred. They're benefiting from nutrients and like tools being given, right? If you think of language as tools, they're being given tools, and like these things are very valuable in learning how to grow and like embrace your adult self, right? Embracing your identity, embracing your quote unquote true self that I don't even think exists, because true self implies there's one, when in reality there's so many different ways that your life could play out. Like every single second you are picking from a multitude of other options. So I feel like the idea of a true self is bad. We already talked about that earlier. Gen Z is the generation of nihilism. They're not doing anything. When we do stuff, y'all just get mad, right? Gen Z, just recently in Tennessee, they like children are marching on the Capitol, right? And what's the Capitol doing? What are the adults doing? What's not Gen Z doing?
So let me get this straight, okay? Let me get this straight. 10,000 Tennessee kids, children, 10,000 of them on Friday march on the Tennessee Capitol, right? They march on the Tennessee Capitol in a big old protest. 10,000 kids actually care about government. They go to the Tennessee legislature. They surround the building. They have signs. They have chanting. They go in the building where they're allowed to be. They're chanting. What are they chanting about? Oh, I don't know. We're tired of being scared of dying in school. That's what they're chanting. Protect us. You're the government. Why don't you pass some fucking gun reform? They didn't say it like that. They're kids. They don't curse as much like in like school settings. I don't know. I'm not a fucking child. But these kids are, and they're scared shitless. They go to their government. They go to the halls of power in Tennessee. 99 members of the Tennessee State House are in session. The kids go fill the gallery at the top where people are allowed to watch. The kids are allowed to get in there. There's nobody stopping them. There's no guardrails. They're not shoving shit over. They're not breaking windows. They ain't doing shit. They go up to the top. They're all standing on the top, and they start chanting. 3 members of the House stand up, walk up to the podium. Speaker of the House loses his mind. He's like, you're out of order. Everybody's out of order. The 3 members of the House who are Democrats hold up a bullhorn and chant with the kids. They bang a gavel. Everybody leaves. 30-minute recess. Everybody likes recess except for the kids, because then they're outside and there's nowhere to hide from all the bang bang. So the kids are now in the halls, and all of the members of the House legislature have to walk past literal children that they're terrified of. They're scared of the kids, and the kids are scared to be at school. And I get to watch these guys with state troopers on either end, with their hand on the state trooper's shoulder. Oh, don't let the 12-year-old girls poke me, as they're screaming, don't let us die in school. So I get to watch this. And it reminds me too, by the way, go watch a tape of a Tennessee legislator walking through throngs of kids who are yelling at them with passion, and don't picture a woman trying to go to a Planned Parenthood. It's like the same fucking thing. But anyway, these legislators who are like real upset because they really want to just keep saving these kids from drag queens, they get all pissed off about this. Do they pass gun control legislation? No. Are they going to deal anything with the problem? We might add more cops to school so we can arrest kids for running or some shit. What's their answer? They're going to ban the 3 fucking representatives that stood up, that stood with the kids. They're banning them. That's their answer. They have a supermajority, and the only thing they're going to do is silence people.
Not Gen Z is just throwing the political opponents in jail rather than addressing the Gen Z activists, rather than addressing the people who are saying, don't kill us. They're just going to ban the political opponents. That sounds like fascism. Gen Z is taking action. Old people don't like it when Gen Z takes action, because Gen Z is taking action for the betterment of everybody, whereas old people are just trying to be capitalists. Old people capitalists don't really like Gen Z. Everybody deserves a better life. And I I think that's where the issue is. So don't say Gen Z can't do anything. Gen Z isn't living the same life as you. Gen Z isn't living to the same standards as you. And Gen Z doesn't want to because your standards are fucked. And your life is not something that we aspire to live to as well. And that's all I got. Thank you and goodbye.